For years, I wandered through my own country as if I were invisible, forgotten. I was ready to give up, to vanish into the shadows of this city. But then, one day, someone stopped. Someone looked at me, not as a stranger, but as a fellow human being. Jack paused again, taking a long, deliberate breath as emotion threatened to overwhelm him. Letting go of the podium, he glanced around the room before focusing his gaze on the front row. That person was President Trump. Because of him, I stand here today, not as a lost soldier, but as a proud veteran with a renewed sense of purpose. In the front row, Trump's slight nod and glistening eyes reflected a mix of pride and humility. Jack lingered for a moment, his hands trembling loosely at his sides before he lifted his head, his voice now brimming with newfound strength. "But tonight isn't about me," he declared, his words resonating through the hall with unshakable conviction. "Tonight is about the countless men and women who have given everything for this country, only to return and face a different kind of battle. It's about the families who've stood by their sides, the communities that must welcome them back, and a nation that must never forget them." His voice softened slightly, yet its resolve remained unshaken. "I stand here as a reminder, no veteran should ever feel forgotten." The room erupted in applause, a wave of emotion sweeping through the crowd. Many rose to their feet, some with hands pressed gently over their hearts, while others let tears fall freely. As Jack stepped down from the stage, his posture relaxed, his shoulders no longer weighed down by the burden he had carried for so long. His eyes met the admiring gazes of those around him, each filled with a profound respect. Trump ascended the stage, placing a firm hand on Jack's shoulder as if transferring his strength. His voice was clear, imbued with emotion as he spoke. "Jack's story is a powerful reminder of the responsibility we all bear toward those who've defended us." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room, ensuring his words reached every corner. "And today, I am proud to announce a new commitment. The establishment of a Veterans Support Fund, led by Jack himself. This fund will provide our veterans with the tools they need not just to survive but to thrive, from housing and mental health resources to job training. No veteran will ever be left behind." The room buzzed with excitement, applause swelling once more. Yet even amid the cheers, all eyes remained fixed on Jack. He stood there, humbled, his expression a mix of astonishment and gratitude. In that moment, Jack wasn't just a veteran. He had become a symbol of hope, resilience, and renewal. After the ceremony, people approached Jack one by one, shaking his hand. Some held his hand tightly, their eyes reflecting a profound respect. Every handshake and word of gratitude felt like a balm, soothing the wounds he had carried silently for years. In the months that followed, the support fund flourished under Jack's leadership. He frequently visited veterans' centers, greeting each individual with a steady gaze and an open ear. He listened intently to their stories, his unwavering attention offering a sense of validation. Every time he stood before a crowd, gripping the microphone with trembling hands, his voice remained strong and resolute. Jack spoke with passion, advocating for policies that cut through indifference like a blade. He began to see the impact of his efforts. Veterans who had once seemed weighed down by despair now smiled again, their burdens easing. Each night when Jack returned home and looked in the mirror, the dark circles under his eyes told of exhaustion, but the emptiness he once felt was gone. It had been replaced by a quiet sense of fulfillment. The support fund evolved beyond a simple charity. Veterans who sought its help didn't come solely for assistance but to rediscover their sense of self. Jack saw hope rekindled in eyes that had once been dim, and hands that had been clenched in worry now extended eagerly to grasp new opportunities. The fund grew into a movement, a powerful symbol of recognition and hope for those who had given their all for their country. Jack often thought back to that pivotal day in the narrow alley, a moment forever etched in his memory. He could still feel the cold draft sweeping through his chest, the biting winter air cutting him to the core, until the stranger extended a hand. That warm gaze had melted through the chill and changed everything, not just for Jack, but for hundreds of other veterans. That simple gesture had saved Jack's life, awakening in him a profound purpose. Trump occasionally attended the fund's events, quietly sitting in the back row. He rarely spoke, but his eyes followed Jack with a quiet satisfaction. A faint smile would sometimes play across his lips. In those moments, he saw more than the transformation of one man. He saw the rebirth of an entire community. Trump knew that the hand he extended that day had sparked a legacy far greater than he could have anticipated. For Jack, his story became a beacon for other veterans lost in their own battles. Over the years, he remained steadfast in guiding the fund, traveling far and wide to meet people and witness lives being transformed. The impact of this legacy lit not just the present but extended into the future, inspiring generations to honor those who served with the respect and gratitude they deserved. What about you? How can kindness and recognition help heal even the deepest wounds? Share your thoughts. Sometimes even the smallest gesture can ignite a powerful movement for change. A tale unfolds. The winter wind sliced through Manhattan's bustling streets, sharp and unforgiving, forcing pedestrians to clutch their coats tighter and bury their hands deep into their pockets, seeking refuge from the biting cold. Donald Trump, wrapped in a dark overcoat, walked briskly among his security team. His gaze swept the streets, searching for something indefinable. Today, rather than ride in the comfort of his motorcade, he felt compelled to walk the city, drawn by an unexplainable urge to experience its unfiltered, unpolished energy. As he turned into a narrow alley, his pace slowed. Ahead, a man was slumped against a cold stone wall, a frayed military jacket draped over his shoulders. The jacket's once proud green had faded to a weary gray, worn thin by years of hardship. At the man's feet lay a cardboard sign with a desperate plea, "Veteran in need of help." Trump paused, his brows furrowing slightly. His gloved hand tightened reflexively before he motioned for his security detail to stay back. Slowly, deliberately, he approached the man, the sound of his shoes crunching against the salt-scattered pavement echoing in the eerie stillness. The man lifted his head, his hollow eyes a mix of exhaustion and quiet defiance. Straightening his posture as much as he could, he asked, "Who are you?" His voice was hoarse, like gravel grinding together. Trump didn't reply immediately. Instead, he crouched to meet the man's gaze, extending a hand in a gesture of calm sincerity. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone steady, bridging the gap between their vastly different lives. The man hesitated, his eyes darting to Trump's outstretched hand as if weighing its authenticity. At last, he took it, his grip slow but firm, using the support to push himself upright. His back remained slightly hunched, worn down by years of adversity. "Jack Miller," he said, his voice gravelly yet steady. "Former Marine." Trump repeated the name softly, as though committing it to memory. "Jack, you've been through a lot." Jack chuckled dryly, the sound quickly lost in the cold wind. "More than I'd care to recall, sir, but everyone's got their burdens." Trump's eyes drifted to the faint metals pinned to Jack's jacket. "You're a veteran," he observed, his tone deliberate and waiting. Jack nodded, a flicker of pride breaking through his weariness before he suppressed it. "Afghanistan. Did a few tours. We did things I'll never reconcile, but it was all for the country." The wind howled through the alley, carrying with it the distant cacophony of city life. Trump stood silent, absorbing the weight of Jack's words. "Why are you here, Jack?" he asked, his voice low but intent. Jack dropped his gaze, his gloved hands clenched tightly. "I lost my way when I got back. Couldn't hold jobs. My health failed. The system, it doesn't work like you think, not when you're on the outside looking in." Trump nodded, his expression unreadable but sharp. "What unit were you with?" he asked. "Bravo Company, 3rd Battalion. We were in Kandahar in the early days." Trump froze, his eyes widening. "Bravo Company? You were the ghost team. The ones who did the impossible." Jack straightened instinctively at the recognition, a fleeting pride brightening his expression before reality dimmed it once more. "Yeah, we were good," he said, his voice fading. "But it all disappeared when we came home." The two men stood in the alley, the icy wind swirling around them, muting the noise of the city beyond. Trump regarded Jack for a long moment before speaking, his voice firm and resolute. "Come with me, Jack. You don't belong here." Jack looked up, a flicker of disbelief in his tired eyes. But as he met Trump's gaze, he saw something genuine, an offer without pretense, an invitation without strings. Pride made Jack hesitate, but eventually, he nodded. A few days later, Trump arranged for him to stay at a nearby hotel, ensuring his privacy. One quiet morning, as pale sunlight seeped through the heavy curtains, Trump sat across from Jack in a corner of the room. The warmth of their coffee cups filled the air, pushing back the lingering chill of winter. Leaning forward slightly, Trump clasped his hands on the table. "Jack," he began, his voice steady. "I want to do something for you, not just a place to stay or a few meals. People need to know about Bravo Company, about what you and your team accomplished. They need to understand your sacrifice." Jack lowered his head, his calloused hands gripping the coffee cup tightly. Steam curled around his face, unable to lift the weight in his eyes. "I don't know, sir," he murmured. "Some memories are better left where they are. People don't want to know about the things we did." Trump stayed silent for a moment, his gaze unwavering. Finally, he shook his head, his tone firm but calm. "Not for them, Jack. For you. You stepped into danger so the rest of us could live in peace. That kind of courage shouldn't be forgotten." Jack looked up, his unfocused gaze gradually sharpening as it met Trump's. He studied Trump's face, searching for sincerity behind the words. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. At last, Jack exhaled deeply and gave a faint nod. Though he said nothing, his quiet acceptance spoke volumes. In the days that followed, Trump's team worked discreetly to organize an event. Private calls went out to Jack's former unit members. Some were surprised, others deeply moved, but all agreed to come, bringing with them their own stories and scars, both visible and hidden. On the day of the ceremony, Jack was brought to the White House. As he stepped onto the grounds, his movement slowed. His eyes scanned the scene, as if struggling to believe what was unfolding before him. The modest suit he wore fit his lean frame, and his hands tightened and released at his sides with each hesitant step. Trump stood waiting at the entrance, his expression softening with relief when he saw Jack. He said nothing, offering only a nod, a gesture brimming with respect, that seemed to steady Jack. Inside, the atmosphere was solemn and dignified. Rows of chairs were neatly aligned under the warm, stately glow of grand chandeliers. As Jack entered, chairs shifted quietly. His former comrades stood, saluting him in unison. Some had eyes glistening with unshed tears, while others remained stoic, their expressions carrying unspoken depth. Trump stepped to the podium, gripping it firmly as though drawing strength for his words. "Today," he began, his voice resolute, "we honor an extraordinary individual, Jack Miller, and the entirety of Bravo Company. They have achieved the unimaginable to protect us. Their sacrifices deserve recognition, not just for the battles they fought but for their resilience in confronting the wounds that cannot be seen." The room fell silent. The only sound was the measured breathing of those listening intently. Trump's tone deepened, rich with gravity. "Heroes come in many forms. But those who fight not only on the battlefield but also against the storms within their own souls are the ones who truly deserve that title." He gestured toward Jack, inviting him to the stage. Jack rose, his steps heavy with emotion as he approached the center of the room. Thunderous applause erupted, filling the space and echoing endlessly. Some veterans saluted him with military precision, while others bowed their heads in silent respect. Standing before them, Jack's breathing was slightly uneven, but his gaze was steady and clear. In that moment, he was no longer just a veteran. He had become a symbol of resilience and courage. Trump looked on, his expression one of quiet pride, knowing the moment would resonate far beyond the room. Trump carefully opened a velvet box, revealing a gleaming medal, small yet imbued with profound significance. Its craftsmanship was exquisite, a testament to immeasurable gratitude. With steady, reverent hands, he approached Jack and draped the medal around his neck. His voice was low and deliberate, each word resonating in the stillness of the room. "Jack, for your service, your bravery, and your sacrifice, we honor you. You are a hero, not just to me, but to everyone here." Jack didn't respond right away. He stood motionless, as if trying to contain emotions too powerful to release. His rough hands clenched instinctively, and his eyes flickered before they slowly filled with tears. The weathered lines of his face softened, revealing a deep long-buried gratitude. His chest rose and fell deeply, as though he needed to draw in every breath to steady himself in this overwhelming moment. Standing tall, Trump turned to scan the room. Clearing his throat, he shifted his gaze from Jack to the audience. "Today is not just a celebration," he began, his voice strong yet solemn. "It marks the beginning of a greater commitment, a promise that veterans like Jack will never again feel alone, abandoned, or forgotten." The room fell completely silent. All eyes were on Trump as he outlined a bold new initiative. His plan included comprehensive support for veterans, improved healthcare, increased employment opportunities, and accessible housing. He also announced the creation of a new fund named Bravo Company, a tribute to the sacrifices of soldiers who had served in quiet resilience. The audience listened intently, some bowing their heads, their eyes glistening with emotion. Beside Trump, Jack closed his eyes briefly, exhaling a trembling breath as though pieces of his spirit, fractured by years of hardship, were slowly being mended. When the ceremony concluded, the applause lingered, unwilling to fade. Veterans approached Jack, shaking his hand, patting him on the shoulder, or saluting him with profound respect. Jack didn't say much, offering only nods and firm handshakes, but his eyes conveyed an unspoken gratitude that words couldn't capture. In the weeks that followed, Jack's life took an unexpected turn. He began attending events, sharing his story as a representative for veterans. At first, the spotlight unsettled him. On stage, his hands often gripped the edges of the podium, and his eyes darted nervously across the crowd. But when his raspy voice broke the silence, the raw sincerity of his words captivated audiences. He spoke of brotherhood, harrowing battles, and the invisible wounds he and his comrades carried home. With each speech, Jack's confidence grew. He felt a renewed strength, not just for himself, but for the thousands of veterans still wrestling with their inner shadows. One day, Jack received an invitation to speak at the National Veterans Honor Gala. As he read the letter, his hands trembled slightly. It was the largest event he had ever been asked to attend, and knowing Trump would be present only heightened the stakes. For a moment, Jack hesitated, then drew a deep breath and nodded to himself. He couldn't say no. On the night of the gala, the venue sparkled under dazzling chandeliers. Jack entered wearing a tailored suit, exuding a quiet dignity. Each step he took felt heavy, not just with the significance of the event but with the responsibility he now bore. Eyes followed him as he crossed the room. Some recognized him from news stories, while others were simply intrigued by the veteran whose story had captured the nation's attention. As Jack stepped onto the stage, his pace slowed. The pounding of his heart seemed to echo in his ears, and the glaring stage lights blurred everything ahead of him. Gripping the edge of the podium lightly, he bowed his head for a moment, steadying himself before looking up to face the audience. Trump gave Jack an encouraging smile, a simple nod that seemed to ground him. Jack inhaled deeply, his shoulders lifting and then gently falling as he steadied himself. His voice broke the silence, deep and warm, though it trembled slightly at first. "Today, I stand before you not as a hero but as a man who nearly lost his way." He paused, lifting his gaze to meet the audience. His eyes, now alight with an indescribable determination, swept across the room. "I came back from the battlefield believing the fight was over, but I soon realized it had only just begun. The struggle doesn't end when the guns go silent. It continues in the stillness, in the isolation, and in the search for meaning once more." The room seemed to hold its breath, an extraordinary hush falling over the crowd. Every eye remained locked on Jack as he swallowed hard, his grip on the podium tightening before his voice grew steadier.